In the annals of ignominious betrayal, few characters can rival the self-serving duplicity of Edric Striona, a figure whose treacheries in the murky waters of early 11th century England offer a striking parallel to the contemporary saga of Edward Snowden. Much as Edric manipulated the tides of allegiance for personal gain, Snowden, with a deft hand at the technological tiller, steered a course fraught with moral ambiguity, casting himself as a martyr in the service of transparency. Snowden's leaking of classified information from the National Security Agency, NSA, to the public domain was not merely an act of dissent. It was a calculated gambit that echoed the wiles of Edric. The latter, an adept at the dark arts of political machination, would surely have appreciated Snowden's skill in maneuvering between powers. Just as Edric's duplicity eventually led him to the service of Canute the Great, Snowden found an unlikely haven in Putin's Russia, a refuge that bears an uncanny resemblance to the court of Canute in its capacity for ruthless pragmatism. But here the parallel grows darker and more foreboding. Edric's ultimate fate, met with a brutal end at the hands of the very monarch he sought to serve, looms as a cautionary shadow over Snowden's Russian sojourn. One cannot help but wonder if, in the grand chess game of geopolitical intrigue, Snowden, like Edric, might find that his patron's gratitude has its limits. Putin, much like Canute, is not known for sentimentality when it comes to dispensing with pawns who have outlived their usefulness. In this, history would counsel Snowden to beware the ides of autocrats, for their loyalty is as fickle as the winds that once filled the sails of Viking longships. This comparison becomes more poignant when one considers the nature of the betrayal itself. Edric, notorious for his role in the St. Brice's Day massacre, demonstrated a propensity for treachery that was breathtaking in its scope and brutality. Snowden, by contrast, presents a modern conundrum. Is the act of revealing state secrets an act of treachery or a higher moral calling? Perhaps it is not such a waste of time to consider whether Snowden's actions, while cloaked in the garb of righteousness, were ultimately self-serving, disrupting global intelligence operations and endangering lives in the process. Furthermore, the impact of Snowden's revelations cannot be understated. While some laud him for exposing government overreach, others point to the ensuing damage to national security and international relations. The global surveillance apparatus, much like the tenuous alliances of Edric's time, was revealed to be a complex web of intrigue and power play. Snowden, in revealing this, did not just cast light on governmental practices. He arguably destabilized an already precarious balance of international espionage and diplomacy. The ethical quandary presented by Snowden's actions is akin to the moral maze navigated by the figures of early medieval England, where loyalty and betrayal were often two sides of the same coin. The question of whether Snowden is a modern-day hero or traitor is as complex as the question of Edric's true allegiance during the Danish conquest. Both figures, by their actions, forced a re-evaluation of the meaning of loyalty and the price of betrayal. In the grand scheme of history, Edric's legacy is that of a turncoat whose name became synonymous with treachery. Snowden, meanwhile, risks a similar fate in the annals of history. While currently lauded in some quarters as a champion of civil liberties, the long-term view may yet cast him in a more ambivalent light. Like Edric, he may find that the initial acclaim and sanctuary offered by a foreign power come at a steep price. The final chapter of Snowden's story remains unwritten, but if history teaches us anything, it is that those who dance between the raindrops of espionage and statecraft often find themselves drenched in unforeseen consequences. In this grand and shadowy theatre of realpolitik, one can scarcely ignore the stark parallels that align Snowden with the fate of Edric Striona. Just as Edric, ensconced in the seeming security of Canute's court, found his fortunes reversed in a fatal instant, so too might Snowden, currently ensconced in Putin's Russia, discover that his sanctuary is but a prelude to treachery. The halls of power, be they in medieval England or modern Moscow, have little room for those whose usefulness has waned. The history books remind us that Edric was abruptly and without ceremony dispatched from Canute's side to the executioner's block. Similarly, Snowden might one day find that his protector's beneficence has its limits. The lesson from history, served cold and unyielding, suggests that those who play the game of espionage and betrayal often find themselves on the losing end, their end coming swiftly, as sudden and decisive as the swing of the executioner's blade.